I feel like the one thing I had thought of too, Tricia, we had a lot of people mistake when we first launched that um, it was a CMTE about podcasting. Like people were like,
Yes.
oh, this is, pod courses, or we were calling them podcast bundles then. This is about how to podcast and you can get CMTEs for it, which could be something really cool in the future, but that is not not what it is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that was a big misconception about what was going on. But I think now that we have more people on the platform, it's more clear that it is a collective thing, that it's MTPC is a platform to house pod courses, that MTPC isn't a pod course, and that pod courses are a thing in themselves, not that there's a course about podcasting. I don't know if I made that more confusing or more clear, but
And that was really, I think, the kind of start of it is we were talking and we had a conversation with, we were also talking with Gabby from Clinical Populations, and we were like, why can't you earn credits for listening to podcasts? We're all learning, it's just a different format or platform of learning, but we're learning through, people's experiences, and through some episodes are like almost like presentations too, where it's just audio format. And so it felt kind of silly that there wasn't an easier way to just be able to get that certificate yet. So I think that's kind of how the seed of MTPC was planted and started to grow.
Yeah. And we took a lot of time to let our ideas percolate, kind of like how are we going to make this accessible and attainable? How is it going to fit into CBMT's guidelines? And so that's when we came up with the whole pod course format, where we always liked the idea of listen and learn, but we all know that kind of is coined already in our profession. So it was like pretty far in, we were having a meeting and I was like, listen, learn, apply. It was just, so that's kind of how we've broken everything down. So you listen to the podcasts, you learn whatever you're interested in, and there's resources in the workbook for you to guide you in that learning. And then we talk about how to apply that information to our practices. Because I don't know about any of you, but I listen to podcasts all the time. I'm like, wow, this is such good information. You're taking in all this content, but like, when do you sit down and reflect on how that's applicable to your life and how you're going to incorporate it? Because sometimes they're big ideas that are great ideas, but you really have to synthesize them and to break them down to make them manageable and make some adjustments to apply them.
Yeah, I feel like I always, listening to podcasts, I have get these tidbits of ideas. So I have these notes on my phone of just little pieces or quotes or things that I want to delve into more. But when do we find time for that? Sometimes if we're listening to podcasts on our drive to sessions or in between things, or when we first wake up, when do we find the time to apply? So the pod courses are just really awesome platform to be able to gain those CMTE credits and to sit down and follow those workbooks and prompts to be able to help you synthesize and reflect.
Yeah, I feel the same way in that, like, it's always like you consume so much and then it's like that there's that space between the application, applying it, and following through. And when Tricia and I were making our first pod courses, we were like, oh, we should have like goal setting, or, in the apply section, like not only do we have like an office hour to have live discussion with other people that you can listen to as another podcast or watch the video, but just to have something where you're like a concrete way of like, how am I going to bring this into my session? Or what does this look like in research or clinical practice or journaling? And just having some concrete ways to then take it and almost commit to the apply part. Cause I know that's where I have the hardest time. Like, yeah, I'm going to do all this stuff. And then it just stays in the notebook.
Yeah.
And that goal part, or like getting it, writing it in your planner. I feel like that is that other step that we really wanted to include.
Yeah. And I feel like that also makes it a really tangible and accessible way for people to engage with the content. And what I love most, so I'm going to backtrack just a little bit, because if we're debunking myths right now as well, I know a lot of Canadian music therapists might see like that it's a CBMT approved course and think, oh, I can't participate in this because it's only for American music therapists. But no, actually, there's a continuing education section in our professional development or continuing education handbook, and there specifically says you can get continuing education credits for listening to podcasts. So
love that. We love that.
You can still purchase these courses and pod courses and get your continuing education credits if you are a Canadian music therapist.
Oh, awesome. That's good to know. I didn't know that either.
Yeah. It's so great because like Kim said, like we all said, it's such an accessible form to get those continuing education credits. I listen to podcasts all the time, and I have so many things that I'm like, oh, I think about them throughout my week after I've listened to them, and then I want to go out and find more episodes that are like that one. And so this puts them in a nice bundle, a nice package that you can find similar episodes with similar themes and concepts.
Yeah. I love that you said that because I in creating some of my resource pages for self-study in the workbook, I was linking other podcast episodes and I was like, oh, like, is this good? Because, it's a pod course and this will lead people to that type of content more, or is it too repetitive and like, do I need to branch out more? So it's nice to know like, hey, you get these assigned episodes with your pod course, but here are some other optional ones that might lead you to further your learning in even more ways than, they branch off into other things.
Yeah, I think that's really awesome because all the resources are right there for encouraging that exploration and fueling that learning. And also the self-study pieces not only, like you both said, put that that goal in mind or kind of encourage that action, but it also gives you a place to come back and reflect on later if you're wanting to revisit it or see the progress that you've made or the learning gains that you have made as well. So I think it's a really cool opportunity, and I like that you can go and see similar content to just kind of go down a rabbit hole of a specific topic that you're interested in.
That's always like my favorite thing is like, even in doing a podcast is what resources people talk about at the end of the podcast. I'm always like, writing them down, they're putting them in my Amazon cart. And so like that part of it is so exciting. I feel like as someone who just likes learning to be like, wow, here's all these paths of, if I want to learn more about trauma, attachment, creative, like you have all of these different ways to consume it, whether it's podcasts or books or articles or research. And I think that's really individualized. I think that was something in creating the pod courses. We really wanted to have that self-study section be so individualized so that when you do buy a pod course, it's like, it's about you and how you want to learn, and you can kind of tailor it to yourself, which is really nice.
Awesome. Yeah. And there's so many options too of the different courses. So you might go to look at what pod course, maybe you see one that you're interested in. But I know for myself, I went to the website and I was looking through them and I was like, I want all of these. I want all of this information, things that I might not have even considered seeking out prior to.
Yeah. That's definitely one of the strengths of like having so many people and so many different approaches to podcasts, because we're all music therapy based in what we do on our shows, but we approach it so differently. And when Kate and I were starting out, we did some market research about like, hey, this is an idea we have. What would you be looking for in this type of thing? And our audience had different results. My audience was like, we want reflective journal prompts, and Kate's audience really wanted more resources and self-study. So obviously we've kind of tied both in to meet everyone's desires and preferences, but it was cool to see, kind of what our audiences were looking for from us, but also how we could serve each other's audiences better in what we were creating. Because I obviously gravitate towards what my audience wants, because that's why they listen to my show, right? And the same for Kate. Mm-hmm. So again, now that we have even more people, so we have 5 different podcasts with pod courses on the platform. So that's a lot of different people with a lot of different interests, and it's cool to see how they all approach the workbooks and taking the courses differently and what they learn from them.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's what's so special about this platform. And the fact that you're listening to your audience, you're listening to the music therapists out there that listen to your individual podcasts and what they want from continuing education. Like you're taking something that they're already doing and building on that in a very productive way. And I want to just go in a little bit more on that and talk about how this platform of MTPC is not only listening to what people want, but it's going to ultimately give back to those music therapists eventually. And it's a great way to support the creators of podcasts that are out there right now.
Yeah. Well, when we started things, I think it was probably one of the first things that we did was we just had this like Google Doc that we were sharing and just like dumping ideas. I think we called it our brain dump that we still have somewhere of just like, and one of the biggest things we really wanted to like build everything off of was kind of our, like the pillars of what do we want MTPC to be about and what do we want it to be grounded in. And so we have those three, part of kind of our mission is accessibility, sustainability, and quality. Because we want, not only to build a platform to serve people, but we also want to make sure that we are, whatever we're doing and what decisions we're making, that they are foundational in those three different kind of tenets of MTPC.
Yeah, a big part of why we decided to go in this together and to make this a collective effort, because again, back to that original conversation, I think it was Kate who was like, I'm thinking of like bundling some episodes together and selling it as a course. And I was like, I've kind of had a similar idea, but instead of, you paying all the money that it takes to do that and me paying all the money it takes to do that and everyone else in this conversation, I was like, what if we all do it together and like we house everyone together, there's strength in numbers. And then we realized how big the idea was, and we started looking at other music therapy business owners who are doing awesome things in the online space. And we were like, what inspires us about that? What are some things that we want to do differently? And we really wanted to be able to give back in a monetary way, to be able to support existing scholarships or potentially set up our own someday, to help the music therapy community, to help, all the people at all levels, in, one of the ways that we all need assistance sometimes, and that's okay. And so, yeah, there's strength in numbers in doing that. And we, as podcasters, we all know that it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of money to run a show. And we're also niche, that we're not getting big sponsorships, and we're not, getting people to support our show every week so that we can kind of just keep pouring ourselves into this and keep giving this information out to the music therapy community. At some point we need some of that energy to come back to us. And so to bottle things up in pod courses and to be able to create this monetary exchange between our listenership is kind of what we're going for. So again, as a collective, so that any podcast who's ready to take the leap and to make their own pod course, we just kind of want to be the house for them to do that. So again, they don't have to worry about all the business stuff. If they just want to focus on their show and make some money doing that, we want to be able to support them in that effort. So yeah.
I love that. It just comes back, I think always when I think about music therapy, I think of community, and that's my favorite part about being a music therapist, especially right now.
Yes.
That's my dog. She enjoys trucks that go by, and so, yeah.
Can you guys hear the yard work going on outside? I pulled my microphone really close so you couldn't hear it. Okay.
Things that happen during podcasting. This is almost like a behind the scenes. Like,
yeah. It's real life.
Real life. Yeah.
Podcasting unfiltered.
Yeah. it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time, and especially like we didn't go to school to edit audio. We didn't go to school to, figure out how to place ads or do things like that. Like it's something that I can only speak for Kim and I, but we were just passionate about doing to get information out. In an accessible format in ways that we were also enjoying doing, and knew that there was a space for what we had to say and for the voices that we wanted to bring onto our podcast. So would you agree for you? I know there are a couple of ways in the States, or there are a couple of podcasts, a lot of podcasts actually, quite a few. I think if I look at the dissemination of podcasts and music therapy in general, I think there's like a heavier tilt toward US-based podcasts and Canadian-based podcasts, but I think there's definitely a space for even more.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. I had this weird phase where a few people from England who were not music therapists reached out to me and wanted to be on the show. So if anyone listens to Music Therapy Chronicles, you may have heard those couple episodes with people from Europe. And that was kind of strange because I was like, oh, people are finding me, and like non-music therapist people are finding me and what we're doing. So like there's interest in this information even for professionals outside of our nuclear community, for sure. And people are interested in listening across the pond, per se, and it's not just like we're listening to only podcasts from the United States because all the information is applicable.
I think the possibility of advocacy with that, with podcasting in general, when you see that, people are listening in Australia, or where, on your stat thing, and that, there's possibly people are listening in a place where maybe music therapy isn't really known very well, or, and it's just like, there's so much possibility for advocacy with that, which is so exciting. And I think too, like you said, Haley, like the more people that do make these podcasts that are niche, the more likely that other people all over the world are going to find them. And then that, advocacy for music therapy continues, which is really exciting.
Yes.
That reminded me. So during this time of our lives, a lot of interns I know are getting hours for listening to podcasts, which like wish that was available when I was in internship. That's super cool. But even before that, one of my very first episodes was with Judy Simpson, I believe is her name, from AMCA, and we talked about advocacy, and like it was specific to the United States and how things are kind of breaking down here. And I had a professor from a college reach out to me and say, I assigned that episode as material for like a classroom assignment because it was the information that the students needed to learn. And it was right there for them. It was accessible. They could get access to it. It was at the time it was more current. So knowing that professionals are listening to this stuff and other professions are doing it, but also people who are teaching music therapy are seeing so much value in this that they're assigning it to their students. And that's really impactful because, maybe someday, but I'm not writing a textbook on music therapy, but in some ways I feel like I have that responsibility now to make sure that what's going out there is good enough to cultivate our profession from the ground up.
I can see it now, the Music Therapy Chronicles book.
Chronicles, it's perfect for a book. Like you have 5 different volumes.
Keep it going.
Maybe someday we'll get there, and I'll look back at this conversation and laugh at myself.
That's awesome. I love that it can be used in that way, and like everyone said, it's such a good tool for advocacy, but also for different forms of learning and different forms of engaging people. Where sometimes reading a big, hefty, dense textbook can be challenging or not as fun or engaging. So it's just a different way to engage that can create a little bit more of a well-rounded experience.
Yeah. I mean, I love that idea. Tricia made the point, I think, a few weeks ago when we were, just kind of getting things together for our newest launch. And she was like, yeah, potentially you can get all of these credits without even being on a screen, like you're just listening to everything, you're not looking at a computer. And the idea for me of like being able to earn CMTE credits and earn and learn while I'm walking my dog in the morning or doing dishes or cleaning my house is like, yeah, like what a great way to multitask. And I feel like I learn really well that way too. And like being active too, of sometimes just sitting and learning. And I'm sure we probably all feel this after this year of COVID with being limited. And it feels really nice to be able to learn, and that we can create a way to support that in a way that supports everybody in what they need and not just one way.
Yeah, and thinking about the way that the world right now is saturated with a lot of visual stimulus. I mean, just having the audio sometimes is just the break that you need in your day. Like even in going back to in-person sessions now, like you're having to really focus and really look and listen and be attentive to what's happening in that space, because there are lots of new things to navigate. And so when you strip all of that back and you just having to focus on what's happening in your ears, I find that actually a really like a breath of fresh air, because you can listen to it before you go to sleep. You can turn it on while you're taking a shower. Like there's so many things. If you're a multitasker out there, like this is the thing for you. If you in your busy life, like you can make time to listen to these podcasts and earn CMTs at the same time.
Mm-hmm. I always felt too, I don't know, I feel like this is a big thing for a lot of music therapists, the time, if you are doing contract work or you work for an agency where there's contract work, you work in the schools, and if you're traveling between locations. I know I felt for years so frustrated of like, I'm spending 8 to 9, 10, 12 hours in the car a week. And that time is just like, just driving, and I would listen to podcasts, and it's so nice to know that like we can help. And I think this is actually part of that sustainability too, is that you can actually, make so much more out of that time, in that you could probably earn 25 credits of time in that 1 week if you're listening to podcast episodes back to back in a pod course. And it feels like, I know for me, I think that would have made those jobs feel a little bit more sustainable if that time was more, I could use it in a more functional way. I mean, it's lovely to just drive and listen to good music and stuff, but then sometimes you want to be productive too. So,
well, especially if like Haley said, like we're busy people, and so we notice those 8 to 10 hours. If you're struggling to check things off your to-do list or to find time for that continuing education, because at the end of the day you come home and you're exhausted, making that time in the car, or those times between sessions, or the little pockets of times that we sometimes end up with feel more meaningful, does a lot for not only what we're able to get done in a week, but also for the way that we perceive our accomplishments and how we feel within our work life.
Yeah, speaking about feeling accomplished, in these series of videos that we're putting out, we're giving people tangible kind of resources or tools or ideas to be able to take from these videos. And so I wonder if both of you have at least one tip about what works for you to make your continuing education time the most effective?
That's a good question. I'm still learning how to make mine effective. For example, I just bought like 5 continuing education things, and I'm like, I want to learn all the things. So like focusing on one. I think for me, and actually I think this is what it did come out in MTPC. I know that for me, I have always struggled with continuing education, with just learning personal growth, professional growth, reading a book about, ACT therapy and then how to bring it into session. I always get stuck on the how to bring it into session or bringing it into session. Like consuming the information is like, one of my favorite parts, but then the action part is that, that next part. So I think whatever kind of information you're consuming, and not just, a CMTE, but if it is just a random podcast about something, finding your way of an action plan of like, what's your way that will bring this into your sessions. For me, if I write it on my planner, it will happen. For some reason, that is just the magical place where if I write it down, it happens. So if I read a book, I have to like be very intentional, or if I do a CMTE, I have to be intentional about that. Okay, how am I going to bring this in? And let me write it down or in a session plan. If you write it in your session plan, even if you're feeling nervous about it, okay, I'm going to try this new thing and bring it in. I think finding a way to make that commitment so that you're not just consuming, but you're actually bringing it in and putting it all into action.
I think Kate and I are too similar to answer this question at the same time, because I am also like a resource and information hoarder. Like I will just be like, oh, like, this podcast, and I'll make playlists that I won't get to, or like this book, and I put it in the Amazon cart, and then I have a million books that I just don't get to. So for me, it's blocking off time to be like, hey, Tricia, you're going to do one of those things. Like, you're not going to keep looking for more things. You're going to sit down and do that thing. And making that work for you. It could be, you might be a morning person, you might be a night person. It might be when you're in the car. It might be when you're folding laundry, so doesn't have to look like what works for anyone else, but I know for me I know I have access to all this information already. I don't need to keep looking for more. I need to sit down and do it. So yeah, I guess writing it in my planner might help with that too. Not to give the same answer, but yeah, being like, hey, those like 50 courses you bought last year, do one of them.
I have this note on my computer that says you're not allowed to buy any more like stuff. If you want to learn here, and it's all the courses and books that I haven't finished.
Love that.
Okay, Kate. Yep. Okay.
Yep. That's so good. I resonate with that. I think I need to put a note for myself there too. Stop buying things. Stop looking for things. Read the thing. Listen.
Yeah. Yes. I love that. Thank you both for sharing that. I think probably we're all a little similar in that. I like the idea of focusing on one thing, and I also like the idea of, being okay that it doesn't have to be what works for other people to work for you.
And I think to build off that too, as that idea of like, it doesn't have to be what works for you. I'm a huge proponent of this too, but learn outside of music therapy. There's so much, like, if you are really into speech therapy, go listen to speech therapy podcasts, go do a speech therapy training, or, for me with doing mental health stuff, I'm constantly looking over in play therapy and there's so many ways that we can take that information from somewhere else and bring it into music therapy too. Music therapy is, obviously, we all know, so adaptable. So I always encourage people, like, if you're interested in one of those other things, go there. It doesn't have to just be music therapy connected to that. Like, you can go there, take the information and synthesize it into your own approach in the way that you do therapy in your authentic way.
Yeah. I think I have two thoughts on that. That's what's cool about MTPC, because like we were talking about, there are so many topics available that you can find there. So back to the prior thought is pick one and start with one. Even if you want to buy all of them, like choose the time to do one at a time. But yeah, it's cool to be able to offer so many different topics that overlap a little bit and also expand beyond just us. I feel like our as a conglomerate, we're all moving more towards acceptance of cross training and like all that kind of stuff, which is good.
About time. I have a lot of thoughts on that.
All of your cross-trained episodes are linked in our pod course.
I saw, yeah. I still get people reaching out. It's amazing how many people reach out about that specific from those specific episodes and curious about that specific topic, which is exciting. Again, that advocacy. And I think almost too, I think this happens with a lot of episodes in general. People just feel heard and feel validated when as music therapists, we can be, I remember driving in the middle of nowhere in a lot of my jobs, and you're kind of isolated, but to hear a friendly voice coming through your car speakers or in your headphones, and then if that friendly voice is interviewing somebody, that just makes you feel validated and heard. Those moments, I think, are invaluable to have, especially as a young therapist. And then one more tip I would say is to reach out to those people that you feel that if you feel validated or connected or feel like, oh my gosh, they're speaking to me, like reach out to them. We all want to hear you. Our guests want to hear, everybody wants to hear from you. So we're all just humans on the other side.
Yeah, I love that.